Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. I'm glad you've decided to join me on this Wednesday afternoon for Wednesday Wisdom with Jim. Hope you've had a great week. It's been kind of crazy around here, but everything's moving in the right direction. Excited to be with you today as we continue to talk about and share the information from my 10 keys to success. Something I wrote back in the 1998 time frame. In fact, I was going through some old papers the other day and found a handwritten copy of my 10 keys to success where I presented to my first audience back when I was the chief of recruiting operations with the Air National Guard. I've learned a lot of things since then. And so while I still adhere to those 10 keys to success, I have, like Stephen Covey said, sharpened the saw a lot since then. In fact, if I were going to title them all today, they would be different titles. And today we're on key number 9, which basically says this. And of course, if you saw it, you read the title in the Facebook post. The title of today's talk is about deal and communicate with people effectively. Now, I'll be quite honest with you. That was not one of my strengths in my early days. In fact, it was probably the number one weakness in my leadership notebook, my leadership skills, my leadership toolbox. It was probably the thing that I did least effectively. And that all goes back to part of my personality, because my personality was one, it's my way or the highway. And it didn't take me very long to realize that if I was going to be successful, then I would have to make some changes. Well, in fact, it wasn't my idea. It was someone else who came to me and said, hey, listen, if you want to be successful, if you want to grow any further in your career than you've gone right now, you're going to have to do some things differently. And I appreciate that that individual took the time to recognize that if I was going to make it, that I was going to have to do some things differently. And so I did start making some changes in the way I connected with and communicated with people. Along that journey, it was about learning about emotional intelligence, something that I wish they taught in school, because they certainly didn't teach it to me when I was in school. But, in today's world, in today's marketplace, in our families, in our community, one of the most important things that we can do is to communicate and deal with people effectively. Now, I love the book that John Maxwell wrote that's called Everyone Communicates But Few Connect. And there are some very important aspects about connecting that we failed to talk about enough in our journey as it relates to communicating. So let me just read you a couple of quotes that I think are important as it relates to communicating, especially from a leadership perspective. One of the quotes is this. It says, the number one criteria for advancement and promotion for professionals is an ability to communicate effectively. Well, what does effective communication look like? It's and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But I have my own idea about what effective communication looks like. And really, effective communication is being able to connect with someone, which goes beyond communicating, Essentially, good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. And I think a lot of times we have a bit of confusion in our communication. And so when we sharpen that saw and we become better, then we can build that bridge. Another quote is, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. George Bernard Shaw. And that's the truth. A lot of times people think they have communicated effectively with others, but in reality, they've just poured words out and they've never gotten to the level of connecting with the other individual or the other group or whomever it might be, your spouse, your kids. And so there is no communication that has taken place. We just believe it has. Another one that I like is this. It says the art of communication is the language of leadership. Our ability to effectively connect with others is so vastly important. And I'm going to take this to another level. I'm going to tell you a few things that I learned from John Maxwell's book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And he breaks it down into two areas. He talks about connecting principles and he talks about connecting practices. And so I'm going to talk to you today just about a few things that I think are important. And these come from the connecting principles. And the first one that I want to share with you is that connecting increases your influence with everyone. Now think about that for a moment. I don't really think it matters what industry you're in. Our ability to effectively influence others is so valuable to our ability to lead. If we can't influence others, motivate others, encourage others to do things that we have vision for them, for our organization, then are we truly leaders? I think not. I think we're just someone with a bullhorn trying to get people to do things. But if we are effectively connecting with them, then we're getting down to their level and sharing with them. So leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Selling is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so we have to sharpen that saw to become better in our ability to connect so that we can influence those that we serve. And yes, that's what I mean. We serve those people that we are in the business of leading, and we are servant leaders. Therefore, we are serving them as a leader. So the next thing that I want to share is the second idea, and this is so important. This right here is just like nailing it home. I mean, driving it home is so important. Connecting is always all about the other person. So what does that mean? That means that we have to put ourselves on the back burner and we have to focus on the interest of the other person. We have to be good listeners. We have to be willing to ask questions for clarification. We have to be willing to put them in the spotlight and take ourselves out of the spotlight, because it's all about the other person. And if we're not doing that, if we're focusing on ourselves, then we're not hearing what that other person has to say. In fact, if you're focusing on you, you're probably one of those who, when the other person is talking, you're talking on top of them because you want to get your words out and not really interested in what they're having to say. But if you're truly focused on somebody else and what they have to say, then you can do something else. You can build greater influence, as we talked about in the first point. So if you're struggling with that, here's a little tip. If you're in a conversation with someone and you're talking too much, which means you're not listening, just take your finger and put it over your mouth. That's a reminder to stop talking and listen. And when someone else finishes talking, ask questions for clarification. Hey man, if you do that, ladies and gentlemen, if you do that, I promise you, you are building a great relationship and you're starting to connect with that person. And you know what? When you're connecting with people, you're getting down to their level and you're getting closer to them, and there's a huge trust being built. And you can get more done when you're working with people who know, like, and trust you. So that's what we're doing. We're building relationships in this process of communicating and connecting. The third thing that I want to share is that connecting goes beyond our words. You know, I do a lot of speaking and I do a lot of training, and recently listened to a professional trainer talking about the importance of the way we speak and how it can influence others. And some of you may have heard of the Moravian Principle, which was created by a professor at the University of at UCLA. And in that study, here's what he found out. He says that what we say accounts for only about 7% of what people believe. So they only listen and hear about 7% of what we're saying, the words. So it goes beyond words. Well, what else is there? Well, there's a lot of other things. The way we say what we're saying accounts for about 38%. Our tonality, the way we raise our voices or lower our voices. If I'm sitting here talking to you like this. An example that I read the other day in a book talked about saying the sentence, "I love you very much." And where you put the emphasis on each one of those words can change the whole perspective of the sentence. In fact, you can change it and make it sound like a question. So the way we say the words that we say also has an impact. It goes beyond the words that we use. And the third thing that he talked about, which is also very important, he says that what others see visually accounts for about 55% of what they hear and believe. So if I'm talking to you and I'm talking about, what John Maxwell always talks about, everything in life is uphill. I mean, you can see I've got my arm up in the air. It's uphill. So when we use our body language, we use it to demonstrate something. And so that too is very important as we share beyond words with those that we're connecting with. So connecting with others goes beyond our words. Another very important aspect about connecting is that connecting always requires energy. It requires energy to listen. It requires energy to think. It requires energy to ask questions. It requires energy to formulate answers. It requires energy to be patient and listen so that you can get what information you need the other person is saying. Remember, the other person is most important, so that you can respond in a way that will be adding value to that individual that you're connecting with. And if you're not adding value to them, then you're taking it away from them. And we always want to be in the process of adding value. So think about that. Think about how much energy you have to invest in a conversation, even if you don't say a word. I mean, it takes energy not to speak, because you've got to listen. You've got to hear what's being said. You got to respond in a way that is valuable and informative to the individual you're having that conversation with. And I can promise you, if you're applying these, you're well on your way to building a relationship with that person. And when you're building relationships, you can influence them in a positive way. You can connect with them in a positive way. You can lift them in a way that will help them grow. And as leaders, we can encourage them to follow us and help in our vision accomplishment that we have established. All right, the next thing that we want to talk about, and we're getting close to the end now. Connecting is more than natural talent. Connecting is more about the skills that we have than it is about our natural talent. So what does that mean? That means that we can learn to be better communicators. Listen, I've got a stack of books over here that help and teach us about being more effective in our ways of communication. The better speak, our ability to speak better, our ability to maintain our emotional intelligence. John Maxwell's book right here, the 15 Invaluable, the Everyone Communicates and Few Connect, is a great book to help us in that process. What I'm sharing with you today, if I had known 30 years ago, I can't even imagine what a better communicator I would have been in my journey. And believe me, I struggled in that process. But I've learned. So I know that we can create the necessary skills, we can develop the necessary skills to be good connectors and communicators. Because it's all about building those relationships. And if we're not building relationships, then it's going to be really hard for us to connect with others. The last one that I want to share with you today, because there is much, much more that I could share on this particular topic, because it is so very important. And this one perhaps is one that you can use to help you get started. Because connecting is about finding that common ground between you and the person that you're trying to speak with. One of the most recent conversations that I had with an individual started not so pleasantly. But as we got into the conversation and we learned that we were both grandparents and we found that we had a common ground, then we were able to come together and meet and come to a resolution to the issue that we were dealing with. But we first had to find that common ground. And I promise you, if you ask enough questions and if you listen long enough, you will find that common ground. And guess whose responsibility that is? That's right. It's our responsibility. It's not their responsibility to tell us. It's our responsibility to listen close enough, to ask enough questions, to find out what that common ground is. And I promise you, if you just apply those 6 simple steps, 6 simple connecting principles that John Maxwell shares in his book, Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. 1, connecting increases our influence in every situation. 2, connecting is always about the other person. Connecting goes beyond words. Connecting always requires more energy than you ever think it does. Connecting is more about skills than natural talent. We can learn to be better communicators. Connecting is about connecting on common ground. Finding that common ground is so important. So I hope that the information I shared with you today, you find some value in. I know it's made a huge difference in my journey. And I've still got a lot of work to do. But I know that I can learn to be a better communicator. I can improve my ability to connect with others if I just take the time to invest in myself every day. Hey, this is Jim. I hope you gained something from today's message. I'll be back with you next week where I'll be sharing key number 10. And I'm going to save the title for that till next week. And I promise you that it's one that you want to hear. It's one that certainly has made a huge difference in my life and in my journey, and can make a difference in yours as well. So until next week, many blessings and much success. This is Jim saying have a good day.